Karua's presidency bid. Does she have what it takes? And today we're speaking with two persons in a studio today. We're talking with Wanja Kariuki, who's her personal aide, has worked with her for a long time, knows her very well. We also have Micheal Orwa, who's a governance and development expert, also a lecturer at USIU, to both give us a perspective on Martha Karua's campaign, her strategy, and whether she has what it takes against the others who are termed the big boys, sometimes rightly, sometimes not. Wanja, let's start with you. What sort of person is Martha Karua? Of course, we see her on television, we hear her on radio, we see her in the papers. But having worked with her, how would you describe Martha?
For me, I think what stands out for me most, especially when I see the Martha that is portrayed, the Martha that is told by media agencies, is very different from the Martha I know. There's some aspects that really enjoys doing, dancing. So I think they don't really get to capture those moments of Martha's other sides, because she has many sides, just like you and me. There are happy moments and there are sad moments, and when it's time to be serious, she's very serious, and when it's time to happy, she gets happy. And she's actually a joker too. She has serious jokes.
Okay, all right, okay. We'll get into matters of the campaign in just a moment. Some of the strategies, decisions that have been made by you and the entire campaign team. But Micheal, let's just bring you in for a moment. Does it matter when a woman is running for president, the demeanor that she portrays? Are they unfairly judged for, is it different from when men are running?
Thank you. Yes, I think unfortunately it is. The yardstick we use for measuring women candidature in political space is not the same as we use for men. In a largely patriarchal society, as we are, not just as Kenya or Africa, but globally, women will have to work twice as hard to earn half as much respect. So it makes it very difficult for women candidates who are historically considered underdogs in any race to make a stamp of authority. So they have to work twice as hard. It's a disadvantageous thing, but I also think you can play around with it and get positive results depending on how a politician positions themselves. Yes.
Okay, yes. Mention the fact that there's a different yardstick for everybody. Should Martha need to smile more? Because that's what everybody says. Oh, she doesn't smile enough. And if she smiled too much, it would perhaps be that, oh, these are women and all they do is just smile and, don't take issues seriously. In your view, have we gotten to that level in our politics where we talk about appearances and where we talk about she needs to smile a little more, she needs to be a little softer? Do you think it's a fair judgment?
The portrayal of Martha Karua and her presidential candidature is pretty controversial, and I'm just, from what Wanja has mentioned, it's interesting that she's saying there's this different side that maybe many people don't know. But also what she says that is striking is that maybe the issues that often are being discussed when Martha is portrayed in media, maybe from what she says, are heavy, weighty issues, and therefore they are not laughing matters. I think that's an interesting way to put it. But I think, yes, there's a need for the softer side of every politician to come out. The jovial side is important, but I think not in a way that demeans the really critical issues that this country needs every 5 years, that we need not to go the exact. I mean, I would be worried if I'm happy, for example, having a politician who is absolutely serious, seems to exude that kind of seriousness and urgency of making a better country for us, than one who is constantly happy and smiling and
okay.
Just seems not to be bothered about the deterioration of our nation's democratic transformation.
Okay, all right. Let's get into the campaign now and some of the decisions made. Of course, the biggest decision is Martha's decision to go it alone and to not be part of the alliances that we're seeing around. What was the reasoning behind that decision for Martha to not be part of the alliances that we are seeing around?
If I can just sort of pick up on the last comment that Orwa just mentioned here, which was the need for a candidate to be serious about issues. The one thing about Martha is that she's really real, and we've never had to think about how do we frame her or package her to make her more appealing, because Martha is real. You know, she doesn't know how to fake the funk, so to speak. So for us, it's never really been a decision or a discussion on, you know, how do we need to portray her. There's no need to portray her because she is real, and that's what she's always wanted to sell to the individuals. Now back to the issue of coalition, we actually look at it differently. We don't see her as alone. I consider myself a citizen, a person, and the hundreds and thousands of supporters and the people even within the party, those are individuals as well. One of the things that Martha is really keen on making sure is for Kenyans to look outside the box. You know, we had 221 members of parliament, and people say that you're alone if you're not associated with any of those people. Well, what about the rest of the 20 million plus Kenyans? Are those not people as well? And that's the coalition that she's always worked towards. That's a coalition she's seeking to serve, and so that's the coalition she is always looked to work with. So for us, it's not an issue of being alone. How is she alone when she's surrounded by hundreds of staff, and everywhere she goes she has thousands and thousands of supporters? We don't see that as being alone.
Okay, who are the other persons within the party? You know, with other parties that we see, Martha has become the face of NARC Kenya.
Yeah.
But who are the other people that we see also going around the country with her?
Yeah.
Who are the influential persons within NARC Kenya party that we can say that's the team?
Yeah. So there's Honorable Lutodo, who was actually a former member of parliament for the East African community, and they've been traveling a lot, and he's actually vying for a seat in West Pokot as well. And there's a number of other people. There's, I believe there's a woman who's contesting the Senate seat in Bomet. There's a lot of individuals, a lot of professionals, a former ambassador who is now the Secretary General. So there's a diverse, great group of people who you may not know of, you know, from being regularly in the media, but these are individuals like you and me, Kenyans, professionals, people who are passionate about this country, people who are committed in serving it.
Okay, Wanja, some would say the fact that we don't get to see a lot of these people, that during press conferences, for example, when Martha is out on the road, for example, yesterday she was in Italy, that we don't get to see these people. We don't get to see the Secretary General of the party. We don't get to see these people, and therefore it's like, you know, she's a lone ranger and going it alone, and which can be admirable in some cases. But people say, okay, well, is she a team player?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that comes out. How do you address those issues?
So two ways. One, I also bring it back to the media. If they're not telling that story, then how would people know?
But if those people are not on the podium,
how
are we to tell the story?
Oh yes, they are. Honorable Lutodo, especially in the last county visit that she did, was doing her intro every step of the way. When she was in Vihiga, there's Engineer Libeso, who is also contesting the seat of governor out there. He does all her intros when she's out there. So believe me, these people always precede her. Martha always gives a stage to the local aspirants to speak before, but the media chooses who they're going to portray and whose story they'll tell. So we do our part in terms of giving the platform, sharing the platform, and they're team players. And whenever the question of team player comes up with Martha, I always ask, she's been in parliament for 20 years. Her accomplishments are remarkable, whether it's in the water ministry or it's in the justice ministry. How did she get those things done if she wasn't a team player? She wasn't in those ministries alone. She worked with hundreds, if not dozens of people, and yet she got incredible things done, including putting us on the path to get a new constitution in this country. That was an incredible feat, including getting the National Accord and all the Agenda 4 reforms on the table. That was an incredible feat. How is she not a team player and able to accomplish all these great things? So these are some of the stories that we really think, and I'm sorry to put the spotlight on you, as the media, those are the questions you should be asking for the public and really making an effort to push out as a story.
Okay, all right. Let's get into, because a lot of other presidential candidates are saying, you know, let's take a look at people's past, their track record, and what it is that they have done for the country, and how they've gotten to where we are. Okay, so the issue of Martha's past will come to light. There's an SMS here, didn't leave the name, but it says, Martha is a jilted PNU person whom we can't take seriously. As Minister for Justice, she failed terribly to arbitrate the electoral dispute leading to 2007 violence by openly being biased against ODM. Was it justice? So here's the thing. She comes from a background where she was a very strong Kibaki supporter, and then of course something went wrong, and she's now on her own. And if you remember during the 2007 election when there was that crisis, she was Kibaki's very strong supporter. Some would say maybe that's one of the things that the electorate looks at and says, well, wait a minute, there was that involvement in the 2007 fiasco, whatever that was. How sure are we, you know, it brings some bearance to the present. What's your take on that, Wanja?
So maybe I can tell the story from an insider, and I'd be interested to hear Mr. Michael's take on this as well as an outsider. So one of the things about Martha is consistent, and one of the things that is prominent about her consistency is her commitment to the rule of law. That has never changed since her entrance into politics in '92 till this point. So 2007, and I'm glad you brought that up because it's an issue that we see all the time on social media. It comes up repeatedly in interviews. Martha did what everybody should have done, which is follow the rule of law, and that's what she called for. And the issue with the ECK commissions, at the time, you remember when there was a gentleman's agreement, well, not really a gentleman's agreement, but there was an agreement in terms of how do you decide the ECK commissioners, and it was supposed to be consultation of parties amongst all the different parties. Now, at that point, there was the opposition had broken off, so there was really technically no opposition during this period. But what Martha did, and she has even challenged her fellow colleagues to dispute the fact, is literally consulted all the regional members in terms of the election of the ECK members. She literally consulted with everyone and sort of said, propose a name. And those names were proposed. So there was a consulted process. So this propaganda about her orchestrating who the ECK members were is completely false. And we actually would welcome an opportunity to challenge some of the colleagues to dispute that. So there was no manipulation on her part. And being the person that she is in terms of rule of law, the one thing that doesn't matter who you talk to, even people, friends, foes, admirers, people who, all types of persons, they say Martha is committed to the rule of law.
Okay. Michael, from the outside looking in, for what people might have as a perception of this, that, oh, you know, all of this is because she fell out with the president.
True. That has been one of the reasons given for her leaving government and stepping out and running consistently, or being seen as a loner. I think like Wanja says, one of the things that is admirable, I think, across the divide, for those who love her, for those who not so love her, is the consistency, and I think knowing what you are getting when you're talking about Martha Karua, even as a presidential candidate. And I think the question of 2007 certainly is gonna be, it's not gonna go away. It's probably the biggest question of her presidential bid.
Because she was Kibaki's one of his very strongest supporters.
She was Kibaki's, President Kibaki's, one of the strongest and most visible supporters, even at the most critical point at that crisis moment at KICC. I think it's a big question, and I think the campaign would do great justice in tackling it head on, and I'm glad she says they've been tackling it. But I think there's also a dimension to 2007 that is not spoken about, and it's in the question of what was Martha Karua at KICC? Was she President Kibaki's agent, or was she just a supporter? Because I think hate her or love her, there's one thing that we need to reflect on in 2007. If today you are running for president and I am your agent, then it's really important that your interest I take as a priority. And I think that's basically what she did. Whether that was the right judgment, I think that is a second question. Yes. You know, like, was it the right thing? Because those who were opposed to Kibaki would certainly say that as bad. For those who were pro-Kibaki, then she was the hero. So it's the hero-villain kind of conversation. Right. But I think what comes out is that she's not taken. I would have expected Martha Karua, especially given the nature of our politics and flip-flopping and saying what is right to win votes, I would have expected her, in the nature of our political culture, to actually come and apologize and say, you know, I was wrong and stuff. She has not done that, which is very peculiar. Either it's political suicide, or she's just thinks she was right, and she's therefore consistent in, you know, this is what I stood for, and there were reasons for it, deal with it. Okay. I don't know how politically prudent that is.
Okay, I'd like us to move now to the policies of the campaign and what the issues are that Martha Karua holds close to her heart. We'd like to be able to understand that. Wanja.
So on her website, joinmarthakarua.com, there's 6 pillars. There's a section called policy pillars. And Martha decided that she wanted to have fundamental issues that framed the foundation for her presidential reign. Like, what would her presidency look like? What are the things that would focus on? And one of the things that is close and dear to her heart is obviously the Constitution. And why does she hold the Constitution today? Because I love the word that she uses. She calls it the framework of hope. To her, it's not just a legal jargon. It's actually a framework which she sees every Kenyan, no matter who you are, you have the opportunity and the protection to really fulfill your full potential. So for her, the Constitution is important. So when the key pillar in our campaign is constitutionalism. And one of the reasons why I strongly believe that we have the best credentials in that is nobody else is best able to really implement and fulfill the promises of the Constitution like Martha. And one of the key things is obviously fighting corruption and impunity. Martha says no matter what it is, corruption really just takes us 10 steps back.
Okay.
If I can give a quick example, she talks about it for every classroom built, 2 more are lining somebody else's pockets. For every hospital drug provided, 2 more are lining somebody else's pockets. So really dealing with corruption, which affects all aspects of our life, is one of the key pillars.
All right. The youth is also a huge aspect of this campaign, not just for Martha Karua, but I think for every presidential candidate. And we have a text here asking what her plans are for the young persons in this country. Of course, unemployment being huge. Where do you see this fitting into the campaign strategy?
For one thing, what that I love about this candidate is that she's so real, and she doesn't just talk the talk, she walks the walk. If you look at our campaign, I think the oldest person, if not on the board, is 55. Everybody else, including main staff and key workers, are all under 40 for the most part. So she brings the actual people facing these issues. Demographically speaking, 70% of this country's population is under 40. She already has those people at the table. So she understands that these issues require the people that you're trying to make these decisions about at the table. So that's one of the things I really respect about Martha. Second thing is, as a mother, and there's a slang term, I don't know if you've heard it, they call her mama or masafara. She actually connects with the youth and really understands as a mother, she being herself a mother of 2 young adults, really understands the circumstances that are facing a lot of the young people.
Understanding the circumstances and doing something about it is
Absolutely.
2 different things. What are some of the key steps, the key things that we would see with the Martha Karua presidency for the youth?
Number one, it's serious commitment to involving them in decision making. It's not lip service, it's actually having youth leaders and youth organizations involved. Second is prioritizing how you issue contracts. Right now, one of the creeds we use in our campaign, the vendors that we use, we ask, do you have percentage ownership in terms of having a youth owner? Is there a member of the youth who is involved? The furniture that we have in our secretariat was commissioned by youth workers. So we just don't talk about the things that we're going to do. We actually are doing them even within the campaign. So it's actually giving practical avenues for young people in terms of entrepreneurship. And even with corruption, again, it comes into issue. Programs that are meant to fund youth programs mysteriously disappear and there's no money. Putting a cap to corruption actually is a key way to making sure that the funds that are available to youth in terms of enterprise and supporting personal development is key. And education. Education is key. Martha always talks about the fact that when she went to school, she had provision for tuition, accommodation, and even for books. And she says she doesn't understand how many years down the line we're not still making those capacities available. So she wants to make it available for education access for youth, not only to be able to go to school, but to be able to, have access to job opportunities right after. And that means creating an environment in which job creation can actually occur.
All right. What do you say, Michael, that she's on the wrong side of history? There's a lot of people that are saying, and I've gotten this on Twitter, somebody saying, Martha Karua, Anthony Ochola says, Martha Karua's bid is future-oriented. She will be a major contender in future elections. Is this her practice run for 2017, 2022, perhaps?
Probably Wanja would be best placed to answer that.
That would be Wanja, but yes.
If it's a practice run or not. I think Martha Karua's presidency has a few there are things that are, I think, admirable, I think you would say. which I think whoever makes it for president will take into consideration. One, I think, if you want, you've pointed out the question of youth. I think there are four, going into 2013, as a young person in this country, there are four things that define this election. And I beg to disagree. It's not about the ICC, although it's really been portrayed as an ICC question. One is the question of youth. By October last year, 70% of unemployed in this country were youth. And that is a staggering figure, and it's rising. It's not coming down. The question almost every presidential candidate talks about is youth. Okay. And it's very scant on the details. Right. I would want a president who actually deals with the how, and that enables the Kenyan youth to move from a culture of entitlement and freebies to actually energize their potential to be able to be job creators, right. To be able to venture into business, not rely on every so often.
Okay. Micheal, back to my question,
yes.
about it being a practice run. Is that the perception that is out there? And how, if so, how would they get into a position where they say, no, we're actually in it for now, 2013? Do you agree that that's a perception that is out there, that Absolutely. This is a practice run?
Absolutely. I think maybe not a practice run, but maybe a good chunk, whether it is through the media coverage or the way she's positioned, or maybe that she's not energized enough. She didn't come out as the person who's going to be the next president in the common mwananchi's eyes. So right. Maybe that is something for
that's
Wanja.
Right, and that's where you would come in, because that is the perception, right. That, you know, okay, she's mounted a good campaign, okay, she's traversed the country, but, you know, 2013, not so much, but, you know, just putting herself out there that I'm presidential material for the future.
Yeah, I have to respectfully disagree with some of the points that your fellow guest here has brought up today. There's nothing trial about the fact that this country loses 270 billion shillings a year to corruption. There's nothing trial about the fact that nurses continue to strike in this school. There is nothing trial about the fact that we lose 40 billion shillings of education. There's nothing trial that we still have maternal deaths, deaths from women giving birth. There's nothing trial about that. And those are the things that are driving Martha Karua's presidency. Martha, as a mother, as a politician, as somebody who's been in government for 20 years, sees nothing trial about the issues that Kenyans are facing. There's nothing trial for me personally as a Kenyan citizen who was born in Isili and grew up in Isili, and this day, if I wanted to take my children to the place where I was born, I can't, because I don't know about the safety, about the fact that there's an explosion that'll happen, that you can't ride a matatu without second guessing yourself. There's nothing trial about that. Okay. And that's what Martha Karua's candidacy is about. And I don't think any Kenyan who values what their livelihood is about, whether you're a news reporter or a journalist or whatever profession you are, ask yourself, is there anything trial about the issues that you face? And do you really want to have a trial run about having a presidency who's not going to deliver on those? And that's what Martha Karua's presidency is about.
I think you asked about perception, and yes. I think that is precisely what I responded to. Yes. I don't think you asked for my opinion whether
and this is something yes. that we need to consider, whether or not your campaign is trial or not. But there is the perception, you know, that okay, the election is already decided. Perception, correct or wrong, and that, you know, Martha is putting the run in. We know the current president tried several times before he finally got into State House. So that is a perception. Right. So in as much as you tell us, okay, there's nothing trial about it, but this is something perhaps you'd like to consider and see how to work around it. Well,
perception by whom? And perception portrayed by whom is the question I can throw back. Because I'll tell you one thing.
It's by some of the viewers who've been sending in their comments, and they are registered voters who would be going to the ballot. So this is not something I'm saying, this is something the viewer is saying.
And I totally agree, but then I also wonder how much weight are we giving to the other perception of people who have this strong conviction and passion that no, this time we're going for the real thing.
But the person that you need to be convincing is the person who's not convinced. Yes, you want to focus on the person that says, okay, Martha Karua is going all the way, but what about the person who's not a believer?
Okay, so our job, which you rightfully say, is to make them a believer. And why I brought it back to the issues is Can I be just very honest with you? I've talked to people all across the board, young, old, rich, poor, employed, unemployed. And no matter how you start out the conversation, you know, I have talked to so-and-so's diehard and so-and-so's diehard. But when I get to the bottom line and I say, you know, who do you trust to actually deliver on the things that you know plague us as a country? 90% say, of course, Martha Karua. I know the perception that you're talking about is the one that always brings up the question of but. And
yes.
That is why our biggest job as a campaign right now is to continue to say this is not a trial run. And the fact that this is the only presidential candidate that has been to over 45 counties, only presidential candidate, mind you. So the so-called underdog has been to pretty much every county, and we don't do big, showy, flashy rallies. Martha's campaign is about everybody matters, and everybody matters means one. And so her outreach, her networking, her engagement is about reaching every Kenyan.
Okay. All right. And it's important that you mentioned there's always the Martha can do it, but.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. You've talked about her traversing the country quite a bit, has been to every county. Certainly not cheap. This is an expensive affair.
Yeah.
So a question in everybody's minds would be, who funds the campaign?
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up because this is the sort of information we use to counter this issue of perception. We've literally been surviving on goodwill donors. Everything from, we had an amazing campaign called Simama na Mama na Mia, and people send pledges through 6/5/2012. Like anybody who wants to support the campaign, you know, if you do pay bill, M-Pesa pay bill, it's 65/2012. And we were actually able to raise a substantial amount of money. And literally, I kid you not, we've gotten everything from 50 shillings because people are like, I really believe in this woman. I really believe in what she stands for. I don't have much, but here's my 50 shillings, to substantial amounts. So it's literally been people who are convinced that, yes, it is time that we as a country took a stand. So we've gotten substantial amounts of donations from well-wishers. The other thing, Martha is a very effective manager. She can make a shilling stretch for miles.
Okay, so all the funds that are coming into the campaign have been donated by supporters?
Absolutely.
Each and every coin?
Absolutely. Martha is a very transparent individual, has not amassed wealth in terms of how some presidential candidates have. Her job actually when she was a member of parliament was to serve the people, did not concentrate on other things. So the money that we have received has been from donations, literally donations. We don't have like, you know, Martha has not stashed, robbed coffers of certain
to
fund the campaign.
Okay,
so, yes.
All right, okay, fine. Let's talk about some of the strategies and some of Martha's opinions that have been, that she herself has put out there. She's been critical of the Jubilee Alliance, talking about the two individuals that are now the presidential flag bearer and the running mate, talking about the fact that they have been indicted for charges at the ICC, and these perhaps are not the persons that we should be voting for. Why is that? Tell us about what Martha thinks about that.
Well, let's start with the premise of the campaign, which is what are the issues that affect Kenyans? And one of the biggest issues we'll go back to is corruption and impunity. And we say this is the problem, corruption and impunity. What is the hope? The Constitution. So for us, it's about how do you best implement the Constitution to deal with these big foes that we have, which is corruption and impunity. Those are the biggest foes. And so regardless of the two candidates within the Jubilee, it's all across the board. This is a question we're asking Kenyans to ask not only of the presidential candidates, but all the way down to the county governments, the people you're electing. It's a question of who is best able to deal with the corruption and the impunity that we're facing, and best able to deal with the Constitution. And that is based on track record, and that is based on, you know, what do you actually do and say? You can say you support the Constitution, but are you actually living it out?
So does she believe that the two should not run for president because of the charges they're facing at the ICC?
We believe as a campaign, and this is Martha's conviction as well, that the biggest issue facing this country is corruption and impunity.
That is right.
Yes.
Wanjiko. Should the two not run because of the charges at the ICC?
The two can do whatever decisions they want, and this is my personal opinion. Okay.
No, respectfully, I'd like an answer on that one.
Okay.
I'm not going to let you go until you.
You're not going to let me go, and I'm not going to yield to the fact, because I think what the media has tried to do, and I've been there when she's made those statements, and those statements are made in a larger context of the issue of it's about qualification.
She has said, why would we vote for people who have charges at the ICC?
What she says is, And let's be real. Let's be real. She has said, think about you hiring an employer, and I mean an employee. If that person is going to constantly have to go to answer charges, how effective are they going to be as an employee?
So what should they do as an employee to be more effective? Should they not be employed?
Well, you answer that question,
No,
right?
you answer that question because you're part of the campaign.
Okay.
We'd like a straight answer on that one, just so that we're able to understand,
Right.
you know, her views on particular issues. And as strong as they may be, you
Right.
know, those are the issues.
Right.
If, like you say, you're employing somebody and they're busy with trying to sort out their legal issues,
Right.
and you feel that they will not be as effective as you would like,
Yeah.
would you employ them?
No, the same way
Thank
I wouldn't
you.
employ some.
Thank you very much.
The same way
Thank
I
you.
wouldn't employ anybody else who's not qualified.
All right, thank you. Because we've got to be, you know, straightforward about some of these
Right,
issues.
I mean, and she straight talks about it, but we want to make sure that people understand it's not about the two individuals. It's about what is best for this country. That's the real issue. And the issue is you need somebody who can really be honestly trusted to fight corruption and impunity. And whether it's that case with ICC or whether it's, I mean, let's face it, they're not the only individuals who are disqualified for these very reasons of their ability to fight corruption and impunity. There is people who face charges. When Martha talks about corruption, you know, she says it was divided between both Kibaki and Raila between the both administrations. So it's not just these two. Raila's credentials are also questionable. So let's be fair and let's not make it seem as if she has a personal vendetta against these two. It's across the board. Corruption and impunity. Who can fight it best and who can implement the Constitution. That's the standard that we're using, and it's across the board.
All right. Michael, if we look at a scenario, of course, every campaign team says our candidate will win, our candidate will win, but at the end of the day, we know we only have one victor when, you know, the March 4th general election will be done. What are your thoughts on the role, possible role, that Martha Karua would play if she does not win March 4th?
If she doesn't become first,
Which she will.
Which she will, of course. Like I said, everybody will say that their candidate is. And, you know, we've had people from the various campaign teams this week on the show, and it's a question that, you know, I like to ask and to interrogate. What possible role would Martha Karua play in the politics of this country if she is not successful? Not when, that's not what we're saying, but we're saying out of all these guys, one will be a winner,
Absolutely.
one will not. Is there a role for Martha Karua after the presidential election, should she not be successful?
Good. Absolutely, yes. I think she's a senior politician and leader in this country. But the role I would start with is that I would expect every contender in the election to play. If they don't win this election,
Which is what?
is one, to concede respectfully to the winner with an interest of peace and stability in this country. Of course, we are hoping, all factors remaining constant, we'll have a fair, just and credible electoral process. I think that is really important for this country. So to concede that. Number two is to be a peacemaker. One of the challenges that this country and the continent has had with quote-unquote democracy is the understanding of opposition politics and opposition's role to be purely that, literally to oppose.
Okay.
Not to be supportive of government or to look like a government in waiting. By that I mean being able to provide alternative vision and say, you know, we think the government has done well in A, B, C, D. We rarely hear the opposition in our country say the government has done amazing in A, B, C, D. We think they would have even done better if they did it this way. Or this is what we think a different priority for this country should be. I would want a vibrant opposition that puts government on its toes, but also looks like that alternative voice that stands out for Kenya. Post 2002, basically, we've had no opposition in this country. And we've had a coalition of looting and a coalition of people who look up to themselves, the political class and the parliamentarians, basically. You've seen what has happened to our constitution post 2010, virtual mutilation in every aspect of it. And I think we need an opposition that can watch out for the constitution of this country, because it's the foundation of our nation. Now, that comes back to the question you asked Wanja, which she conveniently refused to give a straight answer. Going by the premise of what Martha Karua stands for, I think it would be very surprising if the answer to your question was otherwise. She has no option but to say, I don't want them. I don't believe they should stand.
Right.
Because if she's running on the account of fighting impunity, then, and upholding the rule of law, it goes without saying that she believes then, and going by her public pronouncements, that people who are facing ICC charges, and with all due respect to innocence until proven guilty, they should not run. But I think the ICC question is more, it raises a concern with the spirit of our Constitution, beyond the letter. That if you're saying these are such heavy charges, and Honorable Ruto, Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta, I think it's within their right, and they must be given that right, that they have not been proven guilty.
Right.
And, you know, and if I were, for example, in their campaign teams or their best supporters, I would have actually advised them not to run. Okay. Because purely it speaks to a vision of putting Kenya first, in the sense that if this is the big deal, and they are pretty young politicians, I would say, they have a whole mile ahead of them. In the spirit of the new constitution, it would be great. I think it would be a major sacrifice for them, which would actually still endear them to very many Kenyans. Okay. And say, you know, I'm not running because of all this stuff. I want to clear my name, and then come back in a clean deal and run. Okay,
all right. We have a few minutes to go. Martha Karua has, you know, her Twitter handle, @MarthaKarua. So of course the question everybody asks is it really Martha Karua that responds to me when I send her a tweet? We know there's other pages, you know, that are run by other people. But when you're speaking to her on Twitter, because she's got this Ask Martha Thursday, that will be on starting later on today. But when you're tweeting her, is she the one that tweets back, or is it one of the members of the team that sits there and says, yes, this is me, and you know, everybody thinking, oh, you know, I'm not really sure that I'm speaking to Martha herself?
No, it's definitely Martha, and Twitter is, social media in general holds a special place in our heart, but Twitter is especially her baby, and you will get called in the middle of the night or very early in the morning from Martha, you know, saying, do you see what's going on Twitter, and why aren't you guys responding? So it's something that she takes very personally, and I know there have been times like late in the evening, like towards midnight, that she'll still be tweeting, and every day I'll see comments, people saying, oh, is that Martha, why are you still up? But she really is the one. Sometimes one of the ways if she can't sleep and she's thinking about stuff, she'll go to Twitter and she'll read what people say, and she'll respond. So it definitely is Martha.
All right, okay. We're coming to the close of our discussion, talking about Martha Karua's bid for the presidency. I'm seeing your tweets, numerous ones, and I'm also seeing your text messages, and there's one text message I think that comes out, and it says, it's sad that the presidential candidates that will take Kenya where we want it to go are not popular. It's not a contest of popularity, but do you get that you know, Martha has to constantly fight you know, the popular ones? You know how when we were in school, there was always the popular kids and perhaps the ones who are not so popular. Do you think that Kenya has matured to the point where it's not just about who's more popular, about the political dynasty, so to speak, but about issues? Have we matured to that level? Because there's also another text that's come in and said, yes, Martha's policies are great and they're fantastic, but as Kenyans, the majority of the people that go to vote for the popular ones.
And I think it's a two-sided question, because it starts with personal responsibility and then there's a campaign responsibility. And again, with all due respect, I charge us back to the media in terms of what is the media doing in terms of helping people in making those decisions. Like I said, the conversations I've had with all types of people across the board, young, rich, poor, when you really get down to the issues, which is what people really care about, it's without question that Martha reigns that domain. And so it's not that people don't care about it, but it's what they feel are their choices. I've talked to a Martha supporter who said, you know, I really believe in Martha, but what am I going to do? I can only vote for 2. And I said, why can you only vote for 2? And they said, well, that's what I'm being told is in the media. And I said, oh, really?
So is it then a media perception? Because the media also only is a reflection of, you know, society and what they want.
And when you say what they want, is, like I said, we've been across this country, 45 plus counties, and we talk to people, and we see the messages that come in, we see the emails, we see the text messages and the Twitters, and so the support we see is real. And we also see the voter apathy that was out there, and how everybody had to sort of come in the last minute to really rally people to go out and vote. Why are people so disconnected? They're sort of feeling like they're being shoved down the throat with these two choices that, oh, these are the only two choices that you have. So I think there is a responsibility in some part by the media to really put everybody on the table, everybody who's running, and force the public to have a serious dialogue about leadership in this country.
Okay.
And so for us, our job is to make sure that we continue with this message, which we've had great success with, and continue to grow it.
Okay, Michael, just our final comment this morning. I think we have a minute or two. From a lot of the feedback that we're getting on the show this morning, there's people who really love Martha, and there's the people who really don't like Martha. She's one of those characters that elicits that sort of response in people. There's very little middle ground, you know. There's the people that strongly support her, and there's the people that say no. And of course, particularly, you know, 2007 has stand, you know, what happened. What's your take on such a presidential candidate that elicits such diverse responses? It's either, you know, we support you all the way, or no, we don't support you at all.
Thank you. One of the consequences of the alliance building and coalition building running to 4th December is a rise, a significant rise in undecided voters, which is not a characteristic of our politics. So this election is going to be slightly different. The reason being, whether it is Alliance A or B, it has brought in very strange bedfellows, politically speaking. And therefore you've seen a lot of people who are remaining now in the gray area. There's a possibility that a third alternative force, credible enough, can actually tap into that space. But for that alternative to rise and gain some credibility, it has to be different from the politics played by the dominant forces. It has to be issue-oriented. It has to speak to a silent majority of Kenyans who actually whine in roundabouts, in traffic jams, in whatever places, but don't do much about it. It must to speak to the silent majority who actually feel drowned out by the political rallies and the big exhibitionism of big money. There's that silent majority. It has to speak out to the disillusioned Kenya who just say, you know what, I'm done with our politics. Nothing will change. It has to transform that. Okay. If you see our voter registration, it's a point of concern from a democratic growth perspective.
Absolutely.
4 million people did not vote. In 2007, post-election violence, my biggest worry, and biggest worry for anybody who cares about our democracy, was that we'll see Kenyans not interested in votes at all. The referendum proved it otherwise.
Yes.
Massive turnout.
Right.
I was expecting more. And everybody was expecting more. What happened between 2010 and now?
Yes.
So that we had to actually pull every shot to actually make Kenyans vote. It's a disillusionment.
Okay.
It's not good for our democracy. We probably need an alternative. And I think a majority of candidates running in this election are not brand dynasty names. I think that's something beautiful we need to look at. The question is, will the others actually coalesce together around a critical issue and appeal to Kenyans on the 4 critical things that are important in this election? 1, a constitution. Somebody who is faithful to this constitution. It's really important. Number 2, national security. There's nothing bigger. We've never been this vulnerable in our 50-year history. I need a strong president who will reassure Kenyans that it is not about regime security, but it is citizen security. I need a strong president. Never before. We've gotten new discoveries in this country, whether it's oil and stuff. We are in a fairly rough neighborhood. We need Kenyans, especially border communities, to feel that they are part and parcel of this country. Number 3, the youth question. I am very worried about every politician talking about youth in passing. We need youth to actually critique politicians and say, when you are president, what is it that we should be looking forward to? It is not about saying, I will give free money. I'm very concerned when politicians say, we will give money at no interest, because that perpetuates and strengthens the spirit of entitlement that many youth need to be protected from. We have an energetic, vibrant, entrepreneurial youth in this country. We need somebody who can flip that into a positive energy and transform the spirit of violence into a spirit of transformation.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have to leave it at that for now. Running out of time. It's 2 minutes after 8 o'clock. Thank you for your inside view on who Martha Karua is. And we hope to be able to have Martha Karua in that seat in the not too distant future for us to be able to see the Martha Karua that you speak so highly of. Michael, thank you very much for bringing things things into perspective for us, what Martha needs to do and what the election really is about and the issues that are important. We've been speaking to Micheal Orwa, who's a governance and development expert and a lecturer at the USIU as well, and Wanja Kariuki, who works very closely with Martha Karua, analyzing her bid. Remember to keep your comments coming in. We will continue to sample them throughout the show and of course at the end of Sunrise Live this morning. Thank you so much for your feedback. I see it. I see all your text messages, so keep them coming in. We take a short break now, 3 minutes after 8 o'clock. We will be right back. Do keep it here with us.